Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. I'm your host Mark Philpott, and on the show I get to talk to people all across the world about their amazing travel experiences. Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. I'm excited to be bringing you another episode today on the Global Travel Channel. If you're the first time listener here, welcome. It's great to have you with me. Don't forget to check out all the previous episodes. You can find them on the website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. And to all of my loyal regular listeners, thank you very much for coming back again. Well, as you all know, or you may not know, I speak to people about all sorts of travel-related subjects on this show, and today I've found somebody who can talk to us about a variety of things around travel. She is a very avid rock climber. She also likes to travel solo around the world, but she's also working in a profession where she's changing lives, and she's helping young people across different countries in Latin America. So why don't we go over now and meet my guest for today. Her name is Katherine Conway. Katherine, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. It's gorgeous in Colorado. We're still socially isolating, but enjoying the time at home.
You've just made me extremely jealous talking about Colorado. What part of Colorado are you in?
I live in Denver. I grew up in Boulder, so very familiar with the area.
Now, we were talking before we started that you actually do listen to podcasts and you have been on podcast shows before. So is a podcast thing a long-term thing with you? Have you been listening to them for a long time?
I have been listening to podcasts for a long time. I mostly listen to podcasts in the my favorite murder genre of podcasts, as well as news. But yeah, I love them.
Well, hopefully there's going to be no murders involved in this particular episode today. But I'm interested to know how people come across podcasts. Was it a recommendation from somebody that got you into podcasting?
It was a recommendation from friends on long road trips to pass the time. It's my first introduction.
So is it something you do now when you're commuting to work, or when do you typically listen to podcasts?
I listen to them mostly while running, actually. I find it very distracting, so I don't think about running too much.
Yeah, that's good. Good idea. Okay, so on my show, I always give my guests the opportunity to dedicate their episode to someone special in their life. So who would you like to dedicate your episode to today?
I will dedicate this episode to my partner, John Strungus, who is gracefully putting up with me working from home and doing these podcasts from the middle of the living room.
And is John a runner as well?
Yes, he's a far better runner than I am.
Okay, well, he might be able to plug this one in and listen to it on his next
I hope so.
run outside, yeah. Okay, well, this is to John. John, all the best. Have a great day. Hope you're enjoying the time together at the moment, being locked away at home. Now, before we kick off today, I thought we'd start talking about rock climbing. Are you up for that?
Yes.
Okay, good. I thought you might be. So tell us, you're a pretty avid rock climber, and where did that all start from?
Well, growing up in Boulder, it was pretty much, at the doorstep. So I grew up, with my dad taking me on adventures in the mountains, mostly mountain climbing. We have what are called 14ers here, which are mountains that are over 14,000 feet. I actually got into rock climbing through friends when I went to college on the East Coast, but have spent most of my weekends doing it and lots of vacations over the past 13, 14 years. And it was one of the reasons I came back to Colorado recently.
So you're pretty serious about it. Was your father a kind of role model for you in the rock climbing space?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in being outside. I think he often referred to it as his church, and how you connect with yourself, connecting with nature, just making sure you really take that chance to breathe, honestly. And I'm finding it really important during this coronavirus time as well to make sure I get outside.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I think in terms of rock climbing is one of those things where it can be extremely solo in terms of the solitude, but you can also do it with people, which makes it fun as well. What do you prefer? Do you prefer doing solo climbs or?
So the way I climb is it's called sport climbing. So there's always somebody holding the other end of the rope. So
Okay.
there's at
Okay.
least one person
Yeah.
there. But it's, I found that climbers all over the world have a similar, really open and welcoming personality. So it's something I've loved to do while traveling because you
Mm.
just meet the coolest people.
Okay, cool. So we are a travel show, and you've told us about Boulder. So why don't you give us a couple of tips about coming to Boulder to do some rock climbing? Where's the best places to go?
Ooh, great question. So in Boulder, we have what are called the Flatirons,
Mm.
and they're these huge slabs of rock. They're thousands of feet tall, and they're at a pretty low angle, so they're not too hard to climb. In fact, a lot of people do them without ropes, which I am not advocating for.
Right.
Just put a note in there. I don't advocate that. But it's the kind of climb that almost anyone can do, and you have this gorgeous view of the mountains as well as the whole city of Boulder.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay. And what about the El Dorado Canyon? Is that another good place to go?
Oh yeah, so El Dorado is a world famous area that's right outside of Boulder, and it's more known for traditional climbing, which is a more challenging form of climbing where you're placing your own protection as you go up the rock.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly beautiful and very challenging. And if you ever have the opportunity to go there, I would highly recommend it.
I'm trying to get Alex Honnold on my show to talk about his free climb up El Capitan, yeah? And have you seen the film?
I have. My palms sweated
Oh,
the whole time.
oh my goodness. I was under my seat in the theater. I was
Yeah,
that
me
nervous.
too.
Like,
Well,
if
also
you
their relationship made me a little bit nervous.
yeah. Yeah, especially
They
when they
just
moved.
got engaged, though.
Yeah,
Exciting news.
and they went to Vegas of all places, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if we're talking about a famous climber, everybody, if you're not into the climbing community, but if you want to see a dramatic documentary, I'm talking about dramatic, you've got to check out Solo with Alex Honnold because it's just unbelievable how he got up that thing. And he doesn't stop, does he? He's all over the world doing this stuff.
Yeah, he's absolutely incredible. The things he's done.
So what about the rest of Boulder? What attracts people to come to Boulder from all over the world? What other things can they do there besides climbing and hiking in the beautiful canyons and nature?
So Boulder is primarily a college town. There's a huge university. So there's, between 40 and 50,000 students there. Which means there's really awesome, theater opportunities. There's a huge Shakespeare festival every summer. So it's got a really fun and young vibe.
Yeah. What's the best time of the year to visit?
I love summer in Colorado. Most
Mm.
most days are sunny. There's just all sorts of activities. That's sort of blasphemous though, because a lot of people come here for ski season. So there's also like a huge winter following in Colorado. I'm just more of a summer person.
Yeah, right. Okay. What about your travel background? Have you done a lot of international travel?
I have, yeah. My first experience was in high school, actually, through the Amigos program. I
Hmm.
spent 8 weeks in Paraguay, and I got the travel bug, in that moment. And ever since then, I've been either living abroad or traveling internationally for work.
So tell us about that first travel experience because it's actually with the organisation that you're with today, and we're going to dive deeper into that. But I'm interested to know how that first travel experience changes people and what kind of impact it has on your mind when it comes to seeing the world and touching and feeling other cultures. So what was the impact on you for that first trip?
Yeah, I feel like my life has really gone full circle now working for the organization that first
Mm,
provided the
mm,
opportunity for me to experience another place and another culture. I think so many people who grow up not traveling a ton internationally with their family may not have been exposed to a completely different, way of life. And Amigos provided this opportunity for me to live in rural Paraguay with a host family for 8 weeks.
mm.
So I was living in like a tiny little house with a young family, a mom and a dad, and their young son. And there was barely enough room to like move around the house. They didn't even have an outhouse. That was part of one of the projects we did was to actually build the family an outhouse. And so it was this experience that just, every part of it was new and different, and the food was different, and the language was different, and the way people related to each other was different. And 8 weeks is long enough where halfway through you start to think, oh my gosh, there's parts of this that are actually a little bit better maybe than my fast-paced high school life in Boulder. You know,
Right.
there's parts of this I want to take with me. And it was just that knowing that there's things beyond my own like day-to-day experience that I was like, I have to study this. I have to go down a road where I'm going to continue to be in elements like this that take me out of my comfort zone.
So how old were you when you went there for the first time?
I was 16 in this first experience.
And okay, so this is really interesting because we're going to be talking about the organization that actually planned and took you on this trip versus the one that you're working with today, which is the same organization. So how did you first get in touch with this organization to go on the trip?
So the way I first heard about it was older students who came to and did a presentation in my Spanish class in high school. And it was like a double whammy because the project sounded cool and they were seniors and they had done it and they seemed really cool. So it was exciting.
So you wanted to be cool.
Exactly.
And so from the time they came and did the presentation until you actually took off and did your own trip, what was the timeline then? How much time did you get to prepare and plan it all?
We have about a 6 to 8 month training process you go through. So there's a group of families that we call a chapter who exist in cities all over the country, and they help families with the process of fundraising and training, and they also help support the parents because this is pretty new to let your teenager go away for the whole summer.
Yeah.
So there's about a 6 month process you go through where you form really awesome friendships and learn everything that you're going to need to know about what you're going to do.
So were your parents eager to get rid of you, or were they kind of a little bit dubious about you going on this trip?
They were definitely on the dubious side.
Right.
Nobody in my family had spent this much time abroad yet. And while very adventurous parents, were, not sure where Paraguay was, weren't exactly sure who these, people who were recruiting me were. But they, felt right at home once they met more of the families, and they're still friends with some of the other parents today.
I was going to say, a man that hangs off a rock ledge couldn't have any doubts about his daughter going to Paraguay.
Yeah, you'd think, right?
Yeah, exactly right, yeah. So you came back from that trip after the 8 weeks, and what were some of the emotions that you felt after you'd done that first trip overseas, and importantly, doing the kind of work that you did? Tell us about the kind of work, the things that you were involved in.
Yeah, so what I got to do was what's called a community-based project. And so I worked with some Paraguayan youth who lived in the community to design a project that had to do with whatever the need was for the community. And what we just figured out the need was the need for a youth group and for youth to meet once a week and have a space where they came together and had fun. So it had a health education component to it as well. But it was really awesome to see, their ideas come to fruition, as well as our own.
So what were some of the things that they came up with in terms of ideas that they wanted to do?
So they wanted to do, to raise money to build out another area of the community center that would be for youth. So we didn't finish the whole thing while we were there in 8 weeks, but we started with having a community raffle to raise money. So they went door to door to auction off I think it was a gallon of cooking oil, something
brilliant.
pretty small.
Yeah.
They also held I'll call it a workshop. In Spanish, it's a charla for younger students, for younger kids to learn about brushing their teeth and washing their hands, which, gosh, we're all learning about again today on the hand washing side.
Yeah, it's come in handy.
Totally, yeah. So it was really cool to learn the whole process of managing a project and how hard it is to, work with different people in the community. We had to go ask the mayor for permission to do the raffle, so you learn about all the different stakeholders.
And what were your first impressions of the country of Paraguay in terms of, landing there for the first time?
One of my first memories was as we were driving out to the community that they were going to leave the girl who was my partner and I in, is that it was really flat. And I think having grown up in a mountainous region, I had never seen the sunset on the horizon.
Yeah,
So
right.
right away I was like, wow, we're like outside and it feels very jungly. Not jungly like in a tropical way, like a dry jungle. But the sun felt very present. And I think that stayed with me the whole summer because so much more of life takes place outdoors because living spaces are dark and small.
Yeah.
So you just felt very like connected to nature and the fields.
That's really interesting what you just said, because it's the last thing I would think about is that you're used to sunsets going behind massive mountains and not seeing the entirety of the sunset, so to speak. But when you're in a flatter terrain, then you get to see the whole thing. That's a really impressive thing to be mindful of. What were some of your reactions to things like the food and the music and all those sorts of things?
One of the first challenges I had was the family we were placed with actually didn't speak Spanish.
Mm.
And this program is part of it is the language exchange. And I was like, oh no, because the family only spoke the indigenous language, which is called Guarani.
Yeah.
Um, and so it quickly became an opportunity to become familiar with like an indigenous language because that opportunity doesn't always present itself.
Yeah,
So that
that's
was
fantastic.
really awesome, but I immediately had some communication issues. And one thing that I've always struggled with while traveling is food anxiety and like
Right.
wondering when you're going to get your next meal. So I
Yeah.
quickly made sure I learned how to say I'm hungry before I could even say how are you. So that
That's
was
very
the first thing that really jumped out to me.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's really cool that you were put in that position in some ways, because, as you say, it's not every day you get an opportunity to learn an indigenous language. And, I wouldn't say that it's too handy for you in Boulder, Colorado, but it's something that at that time of your life it would have been a really fun thing to give a go to. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Okay, so you came back from that trip, and what were some of the reflections in terms of, obviously you got the travel bug and you wanted to go off and do more things. Did you get this connection to doing good in the world at that stage? Was that when the seed was planted?
Yeah, I've thought about this before, especially as I think about what kind of students who do the program now. There's the chicken and the egg conversation because I think students who want to have an impact in the world are attracted to the program.
Hmm.
But then also, well, okay, there are a few students whose parents send them,
Yeah.
um, and then I think the experience makes you want to do that even a bigger scale. So I definitely came back to my senior year of high school ready to have an impact.
Hmm.
And on one hand, I was like, oh gosh, I have another year of high school. I'm like ready to go out in the world. I'm like ready to go to college and make my own way.
Yeah.
Um, but the last year of high school, presented a lot of opportunities to recruit other students to participate in the program and to prepare for college.
So what was the dream job in your mind back then at that stage? Did you have something that you really wanted to target?
I know that I wanted to work abroad and I wanted to work in the field of international development. Amigos had really introduced me to it.
Hmm.
And so I made the decision to study that immediately in college. And from there was spent every summer and semester I could abroad.
Right.
And I knew that I wanted to work in the nonprofit space. I think there's a flexibility in the nonprofit world to really seek out huge impact, and you're much more flexible than some jobs that might be in the government system. So
Yeah.
I've always been set on working in this kind of field. It's maybe I have my dream job right now. I'm not sure if I would have been able to name that right after I did the program, but I
Yeah.
definitely thought Amigos was pretty cool.
Yeah, right. Okay, cool. Now, for people listening today, we've been talking about the organization called Amigos. So, can you tell us a bit more about the organization itself? Because it is, 55 years old, I think, and it's been around for quite a while. So, a lot of people, outside of America may not have heard about it. So, can you give us a bit of a rundown on the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So Amigos was founded in the 1960s, around the same time as the Peace Corps, which has more name brand recognition. And it was founded in response to some public health issues in Latin America. And some youth from Houston, Texas, wanted to play a role in having a positive effect on. At the time, it was concern around polio. So the first work that was actually done in Latin America was along the lines of immunization.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last 55 years, we've transformed into an organization dedicated to youth leadership. We've
Right.
worked in 13 countries throughout Latin America. And the model is also now bi-directional. So we have some youth who go to Latin America from the United States and participate in a program similar to the one I was describing,
Right.
including community projects and language exchange and leadership development. And we also have a program now where youth from South America do an exchange and come stay in the United States for 3 weeks and implement projects. So we're
Oh,
pretty excited about the model, being bi-directional at this point.
yeah, that's cool. Now, for people listening all around the world, and today your voice is going to 97 countries across the planet. So, is the program open to students and young people outside of America?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had students from throughout Europe, I think Australia, come and participate in the program. So you don't have to join the program through our local chapter system in the United States. You can open enroll. So anybody's
Right.
welcome to join.
Okay, and they do that via your website, or do they have to do it through their schooling system?
They do it via the website, so it's amigosinternational.org.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. So I guess the organisation, because it's been going so long, it's got a fairly creditable structure behind it. So I'm interested to learn a little bit more about that. How many people actually work for the organisation?
There's about 35 people who work full-time for the organization, and we have what I'll call an army of volunteers who work throughout the United States preparing students.
Mm. So what do you think draws those volunteers to your particular organisation?
For the most part, they have had a transformational experience themselves through spending time in Latin America, or they have seen the impact that the program had on their child, and they want to make it possible for other people. But we have had people volunteer for decades. People feel very tied to our alumni network.
So it's all about, people getting that bug to do good, and they come
Mm-hmm.
across your organisation and find that it's a good fit for them, yeah, for whatever reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, good. And how does your organisation raise funds? What are some of your key programs behind fundraising?
So one of the programs that I just mentioned where students come to the United States is actually a U.S. State Department program.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some funds from the State Department. We have funds from individual donors and foundations. And then the model is partially revenue driven, meaning that students fundraise and their families pay for them to have the experience in Latin America.
Okay, so there's a variety of different fundraising mechanisms at play here, and you mentioned the government. How does that get impacted at times like we're going through at the moment?
So we are in a moment of transition and pivoting to the development of a couple of virtual models. For example, our State Department program will become a virtual leadership program because it's not possible to do an exchange program in South America for the next couple of months. So we are, this is obviously financially challenging. We're lucky to, be strong and have some reserves and have some really, dedicated people who want to see us emerge from this crisis really strong. But part of that is, creating opportunities for youth that are online in the near future. We're planning to launch a virtual leadership program in the next couple of days. We're seeing that there's a big need and that a lot of youth, especially in the United States, are going to, not have a lot going on this summer.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, they're going to want to make an impact, that they have a role in this crisis, right? So we're trying to put those two things together and create a way for them, to develop leadership skills, to meet some of their peers virtually in Latin America and throw around project ideas, and then actually implement a project in their local community when it's appropriate to leave their houses.
Okay. So what role do you actually play in the organisation?
I'm the managing director of programs, so I oversee all of our different types of programs and the development of new programs.
Okay, so how's this particular time that we're going through now, how's that impacted the way that the the senior members of your executive team have looked at the structure of the organization and how you do things. Have you been able to respond very quickly to the new landscape that we're in now?
Yeah, our first step, we actually had students who were in the field in South America on what we call a gap year, which is like a year between high school and college, where we set students up with internships and mentorship opportunities. So we were really closely watching the news, watching, speeches by the presidents of countries in South America. When they started to talk about closing borders, we really quickly moved to get our students home. And it's not to say that the U.S. was, in a better position in its response to COVID-19, but to be separated from your family and have no way to get home would have been very stressful. For students and their families. So we got the students on a couple of the last commercial flights out of the countries, which was, really amazing. And since
how many were there out in the field at that stage?
There were about 30.
Wow. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so half in Uruguay and half in Ecuador.
Right.
And since then, we've been working on it, more on the organizational level to figure out how we can pivot. So on one hand, we're, cutting expenses, and making sure that we're, being as careful as we can with our funding. And on the other hand, we're trying to think of what our role is right now. If we believe that youth leaders can take on a role in a crisis, especially in a public health crisis, and have a positive impact in our community, how do we achieve our mission right now? And on one hand, that means that it's, we can do work in the United States, which in some ways is pretty new for us.
Yeah, right. You recently wrote, there is a role for young people in a public health crisis. Can you explain what you meant by that a little bit more?
Yeah, so there's so many facets to a public health crisis, and COVID-19 is, no different, right? There's, marginalized populations who don't have access to even contact, people who are in elderly homes. There's going to be a long-lasting economic crisis that comes out of this. There's definitely areas where we can, build community cohesion through positive, social activities. And so there's so many opportunities for youth to really drive something positive that's going on in their local community.
So what I'm hearing then is there's going to be a little bit of a transformation about the youths that go through this program, focusing a little bit more initially on the home, on the United States, and getting programs up and running there.
Yeah, new for us, for sure.
And what's the impact therefore on the Latin American countries that you've been working with? How's that going to be managed?
Yeah, so I think the impact of this is going to be really challenging in Latin America. There's the current public health crisis, and I think the economic crisis is going to last, maybe even for years, as so many people work in the informal sector, so they're going to get no relief from their governments for being unemployed for a period of time. And so we are, the program we're designing, the virtual program, will also be open to our Latin American students. And we're looking into ways to support some of the partner agencies we work with, so local organizations. And we're planning to put up a page on our website that will show what organizations are doing in Latin America, and encouraging people on our network to also, donate at this time to immediate response efforts. And then as soon as we can, we want to get back to, doing the work in person in each country we work in.
I would imagine that there would be some challenges moving things into a virtual world in Latin America around internet capacity and connectivity. Is it something that's going to be a challenge?
Absolutely. There are some challenges in the U.S. as well, but even more in Latin America. And the populations that Amigos has worked with in the past, there isn't really a lot of connection to the internet in many rural communities. So in the interim, we will target students who do have an internet, access to the internet. And through our State Department program, we're looking into equal access to technology, meaning that we'll hopefully be able to support students and their families in getting access to the internet and the appropriate tech to participate in the program.
So is there an opportunity there for you to go to corporate America and say, hey, we need help with this in terms of, continuing our programs with maybe using some of the big tech companies and telecom companies to step up and help you with this?
Yeah, I feel like you're reading my mind. We were just talking about that today.
I was, so be careful.
Scary. Yeah, definitely. We're looking into, what kind of asks we have for, some of the big corporate companies at this point who also really want to have a positive impact in Latin America.
Okay, good. And another thing that came to my mind was, there's no time like the present, I think, to start collaborating more and looking at maybe competitors as partners potentially in the future. So are there other NGOs out there that are already doing stuff in the virtual space that you could perhaps work with?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually have a partnership with Tufts University. And as you probably know, many universities have gone remote for the remainder of the semester. So we're already in conversations around, like what tech platforms they're using and methodologies around online learning. In the university space. A number of other experiential ed organizations like ourselves and youth leadership organizations are developing, models that are online as well. And we're in a new moment where collaboration may make more sense than it has in the past. And we're reaching out to a lot of our, friends to see if we can work together.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastically exciting time for leadership people because you've got to start thinking outside the box more. You've got to look at opportunities that maybe you weren't so open to before. And I can see not only in your organization, but many organizations can come out the other side of this maybe a lot more successful in the long run with new opportunities that are developed through these times. Would you agree with that?
I would, and what I would add is that I think that this is going to make, this change is going to make it so that more people can access this type of programming. Doing an exchange in another country, it can be expensive. Obviously, we have lots of scholarship opportunities, but it can be expensive. A virtual exchange, may be open, to more students from different types of socioeconomic backgrounds. So there's a part of this that feels like really exciting to me, if we can get the program designed in a way to reach those students.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm waiting for all these rock stars to decide that they're not going to tour the world anymore when we can travel again and just do gigs from their living rooms. Because
it has been fun.
It can save a lot of money, right?
And we can save the environment, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm asking you a lot of questions today about the non-profit side of your business because one, I'm quite passionate about it on this show, and I've done a number of shows before with people talking about traveling around the world doing good. I used to run my own international not-for-profit organization, and there's a lot of question marks in the non-for-profit space about, integrity, credibility, sustainability, and all those sorts of things. So your organization's been going for 55 years, so from a sustainability point of view, the model seems to be working. Is it a model that is sustainable into the future and the new future that we have, or do you think there's going to need to be changes to the funding streams of your model?
I love this question. I think it's something we're talking about every single day on the senior leadership level of the organization. I think as the landscape is changing, and I'm imagining we're looking at some challenging economic moments. I don't know how long they're going to last. We're going to need to reach out beyond our, traditional sources. Our alumni, love us. They've been so impacted and they donate. But I think we're going to need to cast the net even bigger. And I think we have visions that are even bigger. What if we had... we do have thousands of alumni, but what if we had thousands of alumni of this virtual program who are ready to, get out in their communities in the U.S. or, wherever they're based, and make positive change? Like, what if that was a community of people with some sort of common goal? And that doesn't mean we have to build our own thing. We could connect to an organization that is, taking on a big challenge right now. I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to connect to bigger service movements at the moment, and I think that that's going to be important from a mission perspective in terms of tackling this current challenge, but also from a funding perspective.
Is that social entrepreneurship kind of model something that you guys have talked about and would consider, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in our DNA.
Right.
The model is already, mixed in terms of students and families
Yeah.
contributing for the experience. But gosh, like we have an amazing curriculum. What if we
Yeah.
licensed it? What if we got
Yes.
it out there to more people?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many different opportunities. And then even on like the Latin American side of our program, so many of our youth define themselves as social entrepreneurs and have gone on to create, really amazing organizations in their own countries.
Yeah.
There could be a way to really harness some of that power.
Yeah, cool. Okay, good. Well, I don't want to get too lost in that for the sake of my listeners, because
I'm so interested to hear about your social.
No, it's a passion of mine. So I'm just really interested in talking to and hearing about how organisations today are doing those things. But I want to get back to the impact of what you're doing, because that, at the end of the day, is the most important thing. And I want to hear some stories from you about transitions of lives that you've seen and been witness to, of young people that have gone on these programs, and what does it give them when they return from that?
I think there's so many elements of this. The first one, I think, is internal. I think it's an increased sense of self and your own agency, whether or not it's, in designing your own path in life, if it's like organizing your role in your community. I think people come away, really transformed in how they see themselves. And we actually see major increases in individuals, confidence and self-agency. So that's, first and foremost part of our leadership model.
Yep.
Secondly, people come away with a really strong desire to do what we refer to as ethical service, which for us means, doing, the most good for the most people you can in your community, but through an assessment of, the needs and strengths of that community. And people, whether or not it's public health focused or economic focused or environmental focused, people really go on to dedicate their lives to the social good in the nonprofit space and also in the corporate space. So there's many levels in which individuals are transformed. I think everybody who has participated in the program develops a love for Latin America.
Right.
And
It's hard not to.
I won't get too political, but I think that this is really, really critical in a country where, as many people will speak Spanish in the U.S. in like 2030 or whatever. I don't know the exact statistic. And I think it's made so many Americans, a lot more aware of the cultures that exist right within almost every city we live in.
Yeah. Did you know there's more Spanish speakers in the world than English speakers?
I did not know that, and I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah, I was doing some research the other day for another show, and I came across that statistic, which was dated December 2019, so it's very relevant. And it's a very small percentage over, but there are more Spanish speakers in the world today than there are English speakers, so native speakers.
Amazing.
I'm talking about.
Amazing.
Yeah. Isn't it? Yeah. Now, you use the word leadership a lot. I guess one of the reflections that a lot of these kids have when they come back from these programs is that, hey, I'm actually not a leader. It's not my thing, but I can still go on and make a difference in the world without necessarily being a leader, right? Is that something that you would agree with as well?
I think what students come away with is their initial definition of a leader is the loud person standing in front of the room is a little bit different. And there's many ways to be a leader. It can be through, showing empathy or active listening. It can be in your relationships with your peers. It doesn't necessarily mean you're the leader, the designated leader of a group. And I think that that's really powerful because people are able to have, I want to call it like soft change and like have soft influence without being necessarily the person who's quote unquote in charge.
Yeah. Isn't vocabulary such an important thing? Like, when you just talked about that, and I was thinking, yeah, okay, leadership, it does mean so many different things. But if I see that on a website and I read leadership program, my initial thoughts aren't going into all those other levels that you just mentioned then. So I think it's really important for people to understand there's so many elements to programs like this that, the mainstay or the main structure of the program can lead you into all sorts of different directions. And as you've said, these kids have gone on and done all sorts of different things with their lives. What's your journey going to be with Amigos now in the next few years? Where do you see yourself and your own personal development going with this organization?
Well, gosh, I'm so happy to be here during this transition of the organization. I started in this role in June after an 8-year break from working for the organization. So I'm hoping that it's, long at this point, and that I'm able to lead the programs team in developing new offerings and new ways to have the change we want to see happen now. And that we get back to work, traveling in Latin America just as soon as we can.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. And what about the 8 years that you took off? What did you go and do?
So it started with grad school, where I continued to study international relations. It's pretty obvious that path.
Right.
And I'm also, through grad school, I realized I was very interested in, post-conflict work. So looking at how societies heal, after major conflict and what leadership looks like in that context.
Yeah.
So I was able to do my master's research in Rwanda, and also, fell in love with East Africa.
Yep.
From there, I transitioned to working for an organization that did election monitoring, and specifically worked in Latin America, where I learned a lot more about the political side of this work, and the role that the government plays, in ensuring, basic human rights and development. So these experiences, I think, just gave me even more context for the really critical role of youth. And so when this position came open again, I said, I want to dig into youth leadership. Again, youth are creating a lot of change in Latin America. It's a very young continent.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be back.
Well, I do hear there's going to be quite a substantial amount of changes within the World Health Organization's global structure soon. So you might want to get a role there one day down the track.
Thank you. I'll take a look.
Well, that's really cool. What about the organization itself in terms of, I know it's a very difficult landscape now to predict, but where do you think your organization is going to be, say, in 10 years from now? What's going to be some of the new goals coming out of this?
My vision for 10 years from now is we have just as many Latin American youth who are participating in the program as we do youth from the United States. I think there's a huge desire to develop these leadership skills, and especially the entrepreneurial skills that may help youth create, jobs and a workforce, especially, in the post-COVID era.
Yeah.
So I would hope we're working in even more countries, and we've built out our funding model in a way that really supports the participation of youth in Latin America from really disadvantaged backgrounds.
Yeah, okay, good. Are you familiar with the organization called Charity Navigator?
I am, yes.
Okay, and do you have a ranking currently with Charity Navigator?
I don't know the answer to this question. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay. I should have done my homework.
I should
and found out
know
what
the
it was,
answer to this.
But I'm interested to know because my friend runs Charity Navigator. He's the CEO, but I wanted to check to see whether Amigos is an organization that goes through that, I guess. It's a transparency process for the benefit of donors and partners and everybody else, and it does bring a lot of benefit to your organization in terms of giving you kudos for having everything in ship-shape order, so to speak. So you might want to look into that and just see whether it's something that you can also maximize an opportunity out of. Yeah,
I definitely will. I run organizations I donate to through Charity Navigator.
Ah, there you go. Okay.
Yep.
Well, you know where to go to find it all then. So to close up today, I'm really interested to know a bit more about personally the travel experiences that you've had, and what, we are a travel show. I talk to my guests about all sorts of different travel experiences. I love chatting to people who are going off and doing good things around the world. But at the end of the day, what do you come home from some of these trips and are you flat emotionally? Do you feel drained, or do you feel pumped up and inspired to go on the next one? How does it affect you personally?
I usually feel really pumped up. I'm trying to think back to my most recent trip that really, was a big trip for me was my first real solo international trip, which I would highly recommend. I waited until I was in my early 30s to do this, and I went on a rock climbing trip in Jordan in
Of course.
2018, and I had never traveled in the Middle East or gone on a solo climbing trip to Wadi Rum, which is a really amazing desert in southern Jordan.
Jordan, yeah.
And I like the trip was amazing and it was so empowering, even like not as a teenager, to travel on your own and have all these experiences. And I remember just getting back. I lived in DC at the time to my day-to-day life, and I just, felt so much more empowered and excited. And I've actually been trying to like remember some of that feeling as I think about like the time when I will leave my house. I was supposed to be on a climbing trip in Mexico this week, and we're definitely missing some of these opportunities right now, but it's going to make them even more exciting when we can go again.
Yeah, I was going to say the rocks will still be there, right?
I hope so, yeah. They should be.
So I'm really interested about the solo trip because I've had a lot of young ladies on my show who have gone off and done that alone, and they all bring this amazing list of accomplishments that they've achieved by going off and traveling alone. What are some of the things that you came back from that solo trip and kind of sat down and said, I'm really proud that I was able to do this, this, and this? What are some of those things that you'd say?
Something kind of small, but I hadn't done before, was rent a car while I was abroad. I had lived abroad. I lived in Mexico and Honduras and Rwanda, but I had never rented a car. And it was really easy, and it actually made the traveling, I could get more done because I wasn't waiting for buses.
Right.
Et cetera, at like, the local travel schedule. So I was like really proud of myself for doing that and like figuring out how to navigate all over the country. I will say though, I like never figured out how to use the air conditioner, which was just a user error on my part. So it was a very hot week. And the other thing that I have learned is, especially with climbing or any sort of like adventure activity you want to do, I have been able to meet really awesome people on Facebook in advance, which, I'm wary of like recommending this, but, I have found climbers to be such awesome people, and people are so stoked to take you out and to show you their area where they go climbing.
Yeah.
And then it's this cool way to exchange, language, and everyone's really psyched about it. So it's, it's pretty fun. So I found it to be like a shared activity that helps with some of the cultural exchange.
Yeah, that's really cool. How do you think all this travel over the years has changed you as a person? Do you think it's changed you as a person?
Yeah, I've been reflecting on that question a lot since I just moved back to where I grew up. And I never thought I would do this. And I think I've been joking with my mom that it took me, 15 years of traveling and living other places to realize I grew up in a really awesome place. And how much I've like loved off the beaten path places in other countries have really inspired me to explore where I grew up.
Yeah.
So I'm actually kind of digging into some local travel in Colorado, which if you had asked me that 2 years ago, I never would have thought that this would be of interest to me.
That's fascinating because I've heard a lot of people say this recently, that actually going home and making myself aware of what I actually had around me and exploring that more has been a trait that a lot of people were talking about. So that's something that's obviously evident with you as well.
Yeah, and my mom just says, well, why do you think we moved here, honey? And I was like, okay, but I had to figure it out on my own.
Oh, kids will always be kids, right?
Yeah.
Do you still go climbing with your dad?
My dad actually passed away a number of years ago when I was in college.
I'm
but
sorry.
I dedicate a lot of my climbing to him, and I know that he would be somewhere between proud and scared of how excited I've gotten about climbing over the last 15 years.
Yeah, fantastic. So what's the future of the climbing hold for you? Have you got anything major on your bucket list you want to knock off as far as a climb?
Yeah, my current goal is to try to like stay in shape while I'm in my house. I've mounted some boards to hang off of on the wall. But exploring Colorado, and then getting back to Mexico when I can. There's an amazing area there called Chico, which is just thousands of feet of climbing.
Whereabouts is that in Mexico? Which part of Mexico?
It's outside of Monterrey,
Okay.
in northern Mexico, and it's something that's referred to as the Mecca of sport climbing.
Okay, and what's the name of that again?
Puerto Chico. It means the little
Puerto
gate in Spanish.
The little gate, okay. Right, so that's one that I'll tell you what, I want you to come back on the show when you've done that, okay?
Okay, I will.
And tell us all about that particular trip, because I'm really interested to hear about all these freaky. Have you seen that video on YouTube recently of a girl? I think it's a lady. She's climbing around her kitchen.
Yeah.
In
I've
lockdown.
considered whether or not I want to do this, and then I keep imagining myself like slipping off the counter, and then I have to go to the hospital, and I know the doctors are already really busy, so I'm not doing it.
That's got. I just watched her do it. I was in awe that she could do it. And then secondly, I was saying, hang on, you're one slip away here from having a major head injury, It just looks so dangerous. But
not worth
anyway,
it right now.
Yeah, people are filling in their time in all sorts of different ways, I guess.
Yeah.
So before I let you go today, what are your 3 top tips for traveling for people listening to the show today? Tell us what traveling is all about, and your 3 top tips for my listeners.
My first tip is definitely tell somebody your plans. I found that I'm able to relax a lot more when I have some of the, safety elements taken care of, because then I'm not thinking about it and I can really, dig into whatever's happening.
Yeah.
Another thing I love to do is to just sit and people watch while I'm traveling, especially when alone. I think, many of us probably do that while we're alone, but you can see so much just by watching what other people are doing. And the last one is figure out what it is that you love to do in every culture, because then you're going to find other people that love it. And then you just have this like incredible exchange, whether, it's cooking or fashion, whatever it is that really drives you. Because then so many of the differences fade away and you can just, see people for who they are.
Yeah, I love those 3 things. Do you have a medical plan? Do you put a medical plan together before you travel?
I do, and that's actually my job at work. So I, make sure all of our volunteers are safe, and we do a lot of vetting of hospitals and clinics and, plans that volunteers follow in case something happens. And because I grew up through Amigos, thinking about your plan, in case something happens, I always, make sure I at least look up the hospitals and have them on my person, the phone number in a way that's not just in my phone in case I run out of batteries.
I know something else that you're quite proud of at the moment too, and that's your blood type. What's your blood type?
It's O positive. I don't know why it's so hard in the United States to learn your blood type. You have to donate blood. So I just think it's so crazy to learn like in your 30s what your blood type is. But yeah, it's exciting.
There you go. Well done you for putting a medical plan together, because it was something I actually did a show on ages ago, and you'd be surprised how many people don't have a medical plan when they travel. And it inspired a lot of interest, because I think particularly for families traveling, it kind of kicked them up the butt a bit and thought, wow, yeah, we should actually have something in place here in case something goes wrong, which can happen, of course, yeah?
It can, and it does. You have to, have at least given it some thought.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Katherine Conway, it's been fantastic having you on the Global Travel Channel podcast show today. I'd really love to have you back on in the future and give us an update on how everything goes with Amigos and what kind of programs come out of our new virtual world. And also when you get up to Monterey and you knock off that climb, I'd love to have you back and to hear all about it.
Great, and thank you so much for bringing us all these stories from around the world while we're stuck at home. It's awesome.
You're welcome, and I'll keep doing it, that's for sure. So have a good time, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
There we are, from beautiful Denver in Colorado. That was Katherine Conway speaking to me today on today's episode. And what a great journey she's had, starting off going on a project with a non-for-profit organisation as a teenager, and now as an adult ending up working for that organisation. So it obviously shows that Amigos de las Americas are doing something very good. So that's great to hear. So Katherine, thank you very much. We look forward to hearing all about your rock climbing exploits over the coming months and years, and welcome you back to the show anytime. Now, if you're listening today for the first time and you're wondering where you can get your hands on some more of our podcast episodes, it's really easy. All you've got to do is go over to the website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. There's a couple of ways you can do it. You can listen to them there, you can download them from there, or you can go to places like Apple Podcast. If you've got apps like Stitcher and Spotify and iHeartRadio, Google Play, all those places, you can download the shows from them and you can listen to them in your own time. Now, don't forget, all those links that I've just told you about are on the website, so you can get direct access to the Global Travel Channel across all of those particular platforms. If you do like the episodes and you want to tell somebody about it, hey, have you listened to the Global Travel Channel podcast show? Please do it. We're trying to get as many people to listen to the show as possible. And if you've liked Katherine's performance today, you can vote for her on the Global Travel Channel Podcast Awards. Yes, the 2019 and 2020 awards are now full steam ahead. You've got up until June the 7th, if you're listening to this podcast, June the 7th, when voting will close, and you can vote for Katherine in all sorts of different categories there on our website. So just go to the website, click on the awards button, and you can submit a vote for Katherine. Okay, well, that's all I've got to share with you today. I've enjoyed bringing you another episode from the Global Travel Channel podcast series. I look forward to the next one. My name's Mark Philpott, and until we meet again, stay safe and be well.